toxic?
It is. It's toxic. It's an alloy. So anything that's like alloy-y or resiny can have fumes. Yeah. Also, many of the oil painting mediums have fumes, right? Like turpentine has fumes. Linseed oil can have fumes, not as bad. Some of the oil paint. So for people that don't like toxins, they definitely should not use oil paint. They should probably use acrylic paint or watercolor paint, right? Water soluble paints. So anything that the oils technically have a lot more toxins. So I worked for a painter for years whose name was Jeffrey Long, and he basically layered his pieces a little bit like I do. I mean, or I do like he does, I guess. I don't know. But he literally would like do a color and then a piece of like semi-transparent paper on top and then paint on top of that and then a glaze on top of that. So it was like kind of like a four coated experience. And they're really beautiful. They're super abstract and really beautiful. But he used the Galkid to make the paper translucent. So that's when I first started using it in collages and stuff. And it also makes them like yellow, like brownie yellow. But some people like that look, like brownie yellow. You know what I mean? It's kind of like aging something. So and I liked it too for my artwork. Then I started using it commercially, and then I just found it like unreliable. So I have these little sample pieces. These are the ones we're gonna pour. It's been kind of fun. They're actually, I don't know if you guys saw them, but it's been kind of fun to paint the same, same photo over and over again. And it's always nice, I think, for me, even to show like, this is the same. I started with the same image here, but here's two pieces that look totally different, right? Mm-hmm. So they look totally different because of things that I did to them. Like this one, I added a lot more pink. I think did we work on this one together? I can't remember. But like I added the stencil here. I think I added lace in her dress. I added the sort of horizon line. I can't remember when I painted this one. Anyway, this one looks more like just wax, right? It doesn't have any paint on it. Right, so it's kind of always neat to do like a comparison. Here, let me make this one bigger.
Are those 4x6? They're cute. That's a cute.
Aren't they
size.
Cute? I know, they're 5x7.
5x7.
Yeah, aren't they adorable? Mm-hmm. So it's always nice to kind of look comparatively too. At like this is just wax medium, right? And then this is wax medium with paint. So you can really see sort of the difference of what the paint does, right? Mm-hmm. So it really kind of like, I think really brightens or darkens the piece, right? And right. What does the wax medium really do? It really just what?
Quiets it.
Right, blurs it and quiets it, right. And then you can decide, even after you just do the wax medium, like, are you going to add any texture or stencils, right? Are you going to draw in it? Are you going to thin it? Right, then there's sort of like all of those processes you can start to think about in terms of eliminating, right? Okay, so we're gonna do this piece. We could do one of these too. I have a bunch of, we can do both. And we're gonna pour, I think I have one more. Oh, so I have this one too. So I prepared my plate, right? And I have three different pans on here. So this one on my right is wax medium from the jar, like this, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. And now I'm introducing another wax medium, this one.
Okay.
So this one's called bleached beeswax. So the only difference between these two is that one has resin and one does not. Also, one has one is a lot whiter. Do you see how much whiter it is? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. So the reason that I like that is it just gives me like a clearer like sharper layer on top of my photo. Right? Okay. So I heat them up in a pan. This is my bleach beeswax here. And look, when they're melted, they look fairly similar. But this one is actually a lot lighter. And this is what it's weird. I was actually, do you guys know, have you bought a lot of wax medium before? Like, sometimes I feel like the wax medium comes in different. It comes different every time.
I got the Encosticos like you have, the 2.5 pound.
Yeah.
But then I ordered from Amazon because that was delayed, and I got the R&F brand, and that came in a bag.
Was it white or yellow?
I actually experimented to see if there was any difference between the two. It wasn't white, it was yellow like the Encosticos.
So
the only other kind I've bought besides the kind you have is that stuff I bought at Bonnie's, and I think it's a little more yellow.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I mean, I just think it's always interesting to notice this stuff, but this is the bleach beeswax on the left, this one.
Yeah.
And this is the wax medium on the right, and they look pretty close.
Yeah.
And when they're melted, they also look pretty close. Now, technically there's Damar red, but you can, if you feel them, like this one is hard and this one's stickier. This one is stickier, but not that much. So you always wonder, like, did they not add as much resin to it? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, what's up? Like, so this one doesn't have, this one's not as sticky as what I'm used to. Sometimes when I get the wax medium, I literally feel like it's so sticky, I can't even like separate the little beads. So I don't know if that's just like how they manufacture. I don't know. I mean, again, they're doing it by hand. It's not a perfect science, like whatever. All right, so this is a cookie tray. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I love to use, if I was up to me, this entire table would be stainless. Because the thing about stainless, it's easiest to clean the wax off of it. You can heat it up real nice, and you can scrape the wax off super easy, right? So it's like just a beautiful surface to have. You can clean it. So I'm just looking for a paint scraper. Hang on one second. I don't know why. Oh, I can use this one. All right, I'm just gonna use this one. So I like these heavy paint scrapers. I use them quite often in my work. So these are like from the hardware store. And of course, you know, every hardware store is gonna have different paint scrapers and they come in different widths. But you can scrape the tray clean. You can scrape the edges of the panel. You can scrape into the panel. You know, you can scrape the artwork with the heavy scraper. And this type of stuff, I don't keep it. I just throw it away, right? Like this.
You don't keep those pieces of wax?
No, these are dirt. These are dirty. And if I really wanted to clean this tray, I could also like hit it with the torch, right?
Yeah.
But I'm good. It's clean enough. I mean, the idea is that I just don't want any of this stuff that's on the tray to come off the wax in case I want to recycle the wax. So this tray is pretty messy, but I could have, and if you get like a newer one, you could also get like a Teflon tray. I think I got these. I can't remember. I have like a pack of, I have an abundance of these trays. I don't remember where I got them, but they're very helpful, especially if I'm making like small pieces. So I think did we talk about the Starn twins before in this class?
The what?
The Starn twins, the artists from New York?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So they're one of my favorite encaustic artists, and their work is fairly simple, right? So I think we've talked about that. I've really wanted to emphasize that in this class is that, just using wax on photos is very beautiful, right? Like you don't have to use multiple layers. You don't have to do a bunch of like drawing in it, you know, like you don't have to use a stencil, right? There's no sort of necessary layers of application to make it official that you're painting with wax. I really want to emphasize that, right? So sometimes a very simple application process can be like sufficient. It can look really good. It can be like what I would almost say like enough, right? So it's just really about your own eye, you know, your discerning eye and what your end goal is. So the Star and Twins use photography and encaustic. I guess I first started seeing their work, like I think this was the first piece I ever saw of theirs in New York, and it was rice paper with wax on it. So it's fairly simple imagery and very simple encaustic, right? So it was more like the encaustic was just like a surface coating. This one, the encaustic is obviously, because you guys are experienced painters, this one, the encaustic is obviously what?
Which one?
This piece. What's the difference between this piece and the other piece that I just showed you? This piece is obviously what?
More layers.
More layers, right? It's
Like a thicker.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely thicker, right? So very clear here what the wax actually does, right? It blurs the image, okay? Blurs the image. So really, if you could start to think about the wax almost as you think about like lenses that you might use on your camera or filters that you might use on your camera, it's the same thing. You're literally just like filtering your photograph, but I always say you're physically filtering it. The print, right? You're working on the print and you're altering the print. Okay. So like this is another one of their encaustic photographs. Also their imagery, all they did was what they did for this particular series, they just did these trees. They did these very black and white trees, right? With the wax. Like, and that was kind of it. Right? So I was always very moved by this work. I always really loved and was very enamored with the simplicity of the imagery and the gentleness of the wax layer, sort of the simplicity of the whole thing, and yet very tactile, very beautiful, moody, right? And you can definitely tell the images that have thicker wax, such as this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to demonstrate the pour process. And then after we pour, we can start talking about sort of all the options that we have to do with that surface. So the first thing I do, this piece is, I would say, proportionate to this tray, right? I mean, it fits in the center nicely. I have extra space around it. I could do a bigger piece. I probably could do like up to an 8x10 in this tray. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this 5x7 because I have it ready to go. And if you wanted to do a bigger piece, you could get a bigger tray. I actually have a 36x40 tray and I have a 60x90 tray. So I've actually poured pieces that were life size. I think I poured, yeah, for an exhibition I had in 2012, I poured a piece that was 48x66, I think.
What did you pour it in? Yeah, like what was underneath it?
My dad actually made me a pouring a tray. He made me like a tray, like a darkroom tray out of wood, and we sealed the inside of the tray with polyurethane so that the wax wouldn't get absorbed by the wood. And so we put the piece in the tray, and then I had like 4 assistants, and we all had big pots, like saucepan pans filled with wax, and we poured together in unison.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. So the idea of the pour is definitely timing. So but you can experiment with this too. I mean, anything that I say or do is always open to interpretation and artists, right? What do you call it? Discretion or interact, right? Your artistry is always gonna play a factor. When I first put it on the table, especially if I'm doing a really big piece, I like to level it. So I'd like to know that it's fairly level. I know that my table is slightly slanted at an angle down, and I'm not going to worry about it that much. However, I already know, because I worked in the studio for 20 years, that I need to lift this end. So I already know that because I've done this a bunch of times. So I just know that I'm slanted that. So you want your piece to be flat. And the reason you want it to be flat is just so that you have what's called an even pour. And the even pour means that it's equal depth from this side to this side. If the piece is slanting down, the wax, when it's hot, will run down, and this side will be thin and this side will be thick. Okay, which is not the end of the world, but you won't have equal depth on all sides. All right, so I'm gonna just grab this pan with my hand. It's a bread tin, it's not that hot, but if you wanted to use a pan with a handle, you could. And I'm gonna go right from the center, and I'm gonna pour in the center. This is the bleached beeswax. So you can kind of, and I'm pushing slightly towards the edges. Okay, so that's kind of a perfect pour. And it's perfect because I don't see any air bubbles at all in here. So we've talked about air bubbles before, right, you guys? Air bubbles. And we talked about sort of like using the heat gun to get rid of air bubbles, or filling the air bubbles, or torching them after, right? After they've cooled to get rid of the air bubbles. So kind of like 3 things you can do with air bubbles, right? Torch them, fill them, scrape them down, right? Torch them, fill them, scrape them down. So you can kind of remember that. It's like our little like torch them, like our what? All right, torch them. So I have a little air bubble right here, right at the end. So I can think about filling it. So I can grab my paint palette knife or my paint scraper. And remember, we talked about this wax in this cooling phase as being like super fun to sculpt with, right? So right now you can see it's like that super flexible, right, kind of material. You can just fill that hole. And then what I do is I try not to manipulate it too much while it's in this sort of like gelatinous state. I just kind of put it on there, and I'm gonna wait till it hardens. All right, I can also pop this up, and look, it looks very white, right? You can kind of see how this is really truly white. There's no yellow, right? This is bleached beeswax.
Wow.
Very white. And you can decide what you want to do with the edges. Like I like it dripping. Right? I like it dripping down the sides, right? And then look, I can go around to the back, and I can kind of just scrape this off the back, right? And I can sculpt it too. Like I like when the wax looks like it's going around the edges. I think that's really pretty. All right. So now I basically just need to let this cool, right? Because it's totally foggy right now and I can't see anything. So I'm going to just put it over here, right? It looks like a nice white tile, but that's not really what it's going to look like in a few minutes. But this, I can recycle, right? But hence I was talking about being clean. Like you want to make sure that these pieces are clean before you put them back in the pot. Okay. So, and also I'm not going to put them back in the pot because I just don't want to wait for them to melt. So I'm just going to make a nice little pile of this bleached beeswax over here on my right. And I'm going to go ahead and pour the next one. So a lot of times, I think I've mentioned this before, but if I haven't mentioned this before, I'm going to mention it now. I like to work on more than one piece at a time. I'm very particular about that. And one of the reasons that I like to do that is I think that there are what I call waiting periods with wax where they need to be left alone, right? Kind of like children. You're like, okay, you didn't need to go be by yourself. That's fine. I'll see you in a little bit, right? So they need some downtime. They need some time to sort of cool. So I don't like to wait for things, and I don't like to have idle time because I like to be busy. So I've always wanted to have more than one piece to work on. And especially for a process like this, where I'm adding a layer and I want that layer to chill out. So I would have another couple panels ready to just go ahead and keep pouring. Also, this pot of wax takes about 20 to 30 minutes to melt. So you have to keep that in mind, that you're going to have this time period, you know, when this runs out after I've poured it all, it's going to be empty. And then I'm going to have to wait to be able to pour again. Okay. Hence, like also like setting your studio up when you first come into the studio, you know, either you need to have a little bit of busy work to keep you busy, or you need to come in an hour before you're ready to work and turn it on and come back, right? Okay. So this wax is dirty. I'm going to throw it, like, I know it's dirty. Well, first of all, my hands are dirty, which doesn't help, but I know it's dirty because I really scraped down and I got some dirt in here. I'm just going to throw it in the mud pot so I can keep it, but I'm just going to throw it in the mud pot. All right, so I can tell now that this one is cooling a little bit, and I can tell that it's cooling because I'm starting to see the image, okay? And it should cool to almost clear. And look how beautiful this surface is. I mean, it's just like, it's irresistible. It's one of the most prettiest things. I mean, I absolutely still think this is the most beautiful thing. Just totally smooth wax. It's just beautiful. All right. So let me go ahead and do another one. Now, lighter images, let's talk about image quality. So lighter images are going to, I think, be a little bit easier to work with the pour process with, because the wax is going to want to contrast with the dark areas of the image, right? So, and I think Carrie and I have talked about this in other conversations, and maybe even Jen and I, how wax is not totally translucent. So when it goes over dark gray or black areas, it tends to want to have like a little bit of a separation or almost like argument with what's underneath, because it's looking like frosty over something dark. So my answer to that is, if you're going to have something dark, you add wax to it, you're going to have to go dark on the surface to match the darkness underneath. So that's either with paint or encaustic wax or pigment stick, but you're ultimately going to want to add, if you have a dark image, you're ultimately going to want to add darkness to the wax to compensate for the darkness coming underneath. And I can show you that. This is another example of the same piece that I did. So this one's painted, but I think here you can really see I had to add, like, this is a tiny little pour, but I, you know, added texture. I drew the lines in, but I ended up having to add black paint to make this look dark again, right? So that the wax and the black underneath were not disagreeing. When you have lightness underneath, you have a lot more freedom. If you have white or light gray in the photo, you have a lot more freedom to choose the texture and the color of the surface, right? You have a lot more options. You're not dictated by a dark color underneath. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions so far?
Did those pieces have any wax on them before you did the pour?
No, they're totally bone dry. And that's a great question, Carrie. They look like they have, these are photographs of pieces that I've already painted. That's why they look like they have wax on them. So that was a really good question. And I can do a photo. I can do a regular photo too. I can pour on a regular photo too. I have a bigger sample, so I'll do a black and white regular one too. All right, let's do this one. And then I'll do that. So again, like, I'm picking up the pan with the paper towel, and I'm going to pour into the center right, into the center. And what happens when I pour in the center is it makes a nice puddle. And then it goes, oh, I forgot to prop my front up. So it's going instantly down there, which we already know, right? Because we know my table's slanted. And then
Mhm.
I can add this may be kind of interesting too. And what happened, because I took that little break, is I have a little bit of a set already settling, and I kind of merged this other layer. So I have a little bit of a halo-y thing here, but it's not terrible. And I'm gonna have a little bit of a bump up here. But I even love just watching the wax like cool and transition every time. I mean, it's still so beautiful. I don't have any air bubbles. So again, I have a perfect pour, which I'm pretty happy about. And I did not preheat these panels. I did not preheat them.
You don't need to?
I don't seem to be needing to tonight. I didn't, and I'm not having any air bubbles. I mean, it's never a bad thing, and it's just like not a bad, it's like a good habit to have, right?
Okay.
I think preheating is fine. I think it's fine. Okay. So once it's kind of like whitened over like this, you can see that's no longer runny or watery. That's when you can take the paint scraper and pop it up, right? And pick it up out of the wax. And then you can scrape the edges, right? So I think these side edges are super pretty, the way the wax dripped over. So you might decide that you want to keep all of this. And if that's the case, then you're just going to kind of scrape off the bottom. I mean, you could keep all of this if you want, right? And then, but look at the bottom, right? So you definitely want to get this off the bottom. And while it's warm, I think it's the best time to do it, right? So I'm scraping off the bottom. Kind of trimming the sides. I'm trying not to squeeze it too hard. And I'm trying to hold it from the bottom edge like this too, right? So I'm going to leave a lot of these drips over here just because I think they're so beautiful. Now, if I didn't want any drips on here or any wax on the edges, I could have used masking tape and I could mask the outside edges so that all I would have to do would be pull the tape off, right? The other thing you can do, which is interesting, and I think I actually demonstrated this with Jen. Do you remember when I did this in Texas?
I do, yep.
So I actually used masking tape to create a little bit of an edge or a lip, and I filled the wax up thicker so that it was more exaggerated how blurry it was. Does that make sense?
I have some pictures of that.
Yeah, I mean, I could do it again too. So either way. Okay, so here I am.
I really liked that. I mean, I have this. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. So I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to actually just fill this up with bleach beeswax again. I'm going to do another photo. This is, hang on one second. I'm going to grab it. Hang on. This is not my photo, but I think it's going to be a good example. So this is just a black and white photo of these peonies on a wood panel. These wood panels came from Amazon. They actually came in a 4-pack. They were very affordable. And I was using them for a little workshop-y class I did with some ladies. So when you first glue the panel on, you want to be sensitive that the edges are flush. So I can see like the edges over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of sandpaper and I'm going to trim the edges down so that the wax can roll over the edges, right? Because you can see here that this one is sanded and I got that nice like roll over, right? And I can also do an edge with masking tape just to show you. You can see too that this one's cooling down very nicely and it's getting much more transparent, right? So I'm able to see the image a lot more, and the surface is totally like cool to the touch, and it'll probably get just a slight bit sharper. So that means that the image will just get a little bit more, the wax will get just a little bit more translucent, and I'll be able to see the image more clearly. And honestly, there's like a part of me that's always like, this is just so beautiful, like just as it is, like why touch it? Like why even like do anything to it? I mean, I would say that the images are very, very soft underneath the wax, but I think it is a nice look and it is pretty. If you don't want the wax to be this color, we can talk about just slightly coloring the wax, and there are many options to doing that. So what do you know, with what you know already about wax, what are some of the ways that we could possibly just tint those surfaces to have color in them?
Well, you could
You mean
use
ahead.
translucent.
Wait, Carrie first and then Celia. Go ahead. Carrie?
Translucent glaze.
A translucent glaze, right? Of what though? What material? Not wax. We don't want to use another layer of wax. It'll make it too thick. What else could we use?
Oh,
Could you put
Um,
turmeric in the medium?
You could put turmeric in the medium. Yeah, if you really, really love that yellowy color, absolutely. You could put another powdered pigment in there too. I mean,
Could you melt a little bit of encaustic paint?
you could melt a tiny bit of encaustic paint in there. Yes, if you wanted it to be one color. If you wanted the work to be one color, like if you wanted the wax to all be slightly blue, that's actually a good idea. I can demonstrate that for the next round. Let's see if I can get this flower one. I just want you guys to see the wax on a black and white that has white in it. I really want you to see the difference between the way that the poured wax looks over middle gray, black, and white. So you see how this picture is like a perfect example? It's almost like dark, middle, light, right? It's perfect.
Is
Alright.
the bleached wax, because it doesn't have the resin in it, is it softer to work with?
No, it's I don't know, can you tell by the way it's like when it hardens, right now it's like lukewarm. It's snappy.
It's like
It's not
brittle.
sticky, it's brittle. Yeah, it's brittle. It's not cool yet, but when it cools, it'll just snap. It's not like the wax medium at all. And one
And
of the
then
reasons,
when it dries, is it softer? Like, isn't resin supposed to make it dry harder?
the resin actually acts as a preservative in the wax more than anything else. If you use a lot of Damar, it will eventually get glossy. It'll get hard and glossy. When we're using it just in the wax medium, the way the store made it, it's a very little bit of resin, and it's acting as a preservative for the wax and the encaustic so that they don't do a thing called blooming, which is when the moisture escapes from the wax.
could you put those in the refrigerator if you wanted them to cool off quicker?
Yes, you could put them in the refrigerator if you wanted them to cool off quicker. Yes, great idea, Carrie. Absolutely. And a lot of encaustic artists do that. They have like in a refrigerator in their studio, and they might just quick drop a panel in there so that they can work on it faster. I just make more work so that I just kind of work in a flow. And when my materials are used up, I just work on something else. You know what I mean? While I'm waiting, or I do something else in the studio. I mean, I feel like when you have your own studio, there's always like chores that need to get done. Like there's always work to be done in the studio, whether it's like taking out the trash or cleaning the palette or washing some brushes, right? So there's always kind of like busy work that can happen in the studio while you're waiting for something to cool. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get the sandpaper. I'm just going to sand the edges on this one piece. I'm also going to go get my razor blade box so that I can show you how I shave the bleached beeswax. I would not recommend that you use the bleached beeswax for anything other than a pouring process. It's not meant to be mixed with encaustic wax.
Okay.
you can get away with a single coat of it in any situation. And I've actually made pieces that were partially poured and partially brushed. And the reason that I do that is I think it's something that I've mentioned to you guys at another time, is that I like the contrast of what I would call smooth versus bumpy, or quiet versus noisy, right? So when we're talking about like film, we used to talk about noise in terms of being like the size of grain, right? Like, so a picture got noisy when it got like too grainy or too blurry. And usually that happened when you were taking a picture in a low light situation, or sort of like a fringe. You'd be on the edge of a lighting situation and you'd be like really trying to get the picture, and you would be messing it up, but you'd still get something. And we used to call those like noisy pictures. So to me, wax is noisy because it has chaos and texture, and it's adding like an obstacle in front of the viewer to see the picture, right? So I like the poured because I find that it's very quiet, and it's almost like Celia was reminding me like what you said about winter. It's like frozen. There's not a lot of chaos. There aren't leaves blowing around. It's not messy. Things aren't growing. There aren't a million bugs outside. Like, it's a totally different environment, you know, the cold. So, and it's tranquil, it's smooth, it's quiet. So maybe this process speaks to you in your aesthetics, something very calming. And it's a fairly simple process. I mean, I've been doing this. This was my first process. I've been doing this consistently for like years. I mean, since like, we don't need to say how many, but a few. This is kind of interesting. So this nude right here, this green nude, this was made by me. The photo was taken in it says New Orleans. I'm gonna say this one was made in 2004. So this is a poured process. It's a black and white photo, and I painted the surface with Gawked and green paint. And I still think that this is like really beautiful. It does slightly have a little shine to it, but I showed these in a gallery. I mean, I would sell out the whole show. Right? So it's like, why not just keep making that work? Like, why not just go right back to where I was and just make these little babies and sell them? They're very beautiful. They're simple, they're gorgeous. So I let the wax go over the edges. I rubbed it with the Gawked and the oil paint. I just made them solid colors. And then literally all I did was I put the paint on, and I would just take a paper towel and wipe away where the subject was. And that would be it. Like done and done. So, you can see the complexity I've added to my own work. And it's like, okay, well, why do we do that? Why do we make our lives more complicated? Why do we make art more complicated? Why do we try new things? And I just think it's sort of like human nature and curiosity, right? That we keep trying stuff, even though we know in a way that like what's really simple is really good, but it's like part of us, or at least for me, it's like I can't leave it alone. It's like I can't stop touching it, or I don't know, or I think I know can discover something else. I mean, and I'm not saying this negatively. Like I'm happy that my work's changed and evolved and gotten more complicated and interesting, but in a way, there's always sort of a longing for what I know was like good about something very simple in my past that works well, right? Now that particular piece did not yellow at all. And I have no rhyme or reason as to why the pieces that yellowed and why. Oh, actually, this is cute. So I wrote actually, this was made in 2000, 21 years ago. Okay. So anyway, all right. So let's work on these. I'm still waiting for that bleached beeswax to melt, but these are looking pretty cool. Oh, I forgot the razor blades. Hang on, let me grab the razor blades. So I like super sharp blades for this process, and this is called shaving. So literally shaving. We're gonna shave it. Okay, so shaving wax is like shaving an ice, like a snow cone. So these are my razor blades. I start with a freshie. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking to create visual contrast. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna thin the wax in one area. So I'm gonna pick where my subject is, and I'm just gonna start swiping the blade over this girl. And I'm going back and forth, all right? And I'm right on the edge. I'm not like cutting in on an angle. I'm trying to stay super straight and smooth. So you can see how much wax I just took off. Can you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen is that I'm going to create what's called a curved surface. And the curved surface is going to make the wax thinner in one area in comparison to thicker in other areas. And it's going to create clarity, photo, right, sharpness. So I'm going to try to keep, now her figure isn't exactly, she's hard because her arms are sticking out, but I'm going to focus mostly like, I could focus mostly like right here. And you can see that gradually she's like, look how much wax is coming off, right? So she's going to get sharper. So I'm just thinning this perfect coat of wax. I can also start to work on this little bottom part down here. And I think it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't really want to like lighten it anywhere else. You know, like I don't want to lighten the whole thing. I just kind of want to focus on this dress area, and I'm just going backwards and forwards like in this little semicircle. Okay? And I feel like it's getting sharper, and I don't want to go too thin. So in a minute, but you can see, hopefully you can see. Can you see how much wax I've taken off? Like that's a good amount of wax I've taken off with this razor blade. And I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. Now, if I wanted to go more specifically into her, I could use a tool, a carving tool, right? Or some type of wood tool, but I don't. I want to keep the surface really smooth. I don't want an irregular surface. I want it to be like ice and super smooth. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like it's frosty and beautiful, but I can still see the photo, right? And it's pretty much perfect. I'm happy with it. All right, so I'm gonna put that one to the side, and now I'm gonna do this one. So I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna focus on this one, like right again. I'm gonna pick that sweet spot, and I'm gonna focus on just thinning the wax in this one area, and then we can talk about coloring it. So, because
And those were color prints, Leah, right?
These were color prints, yeah. These were color prints, which usually I work on black and white. I'm going to do a black and white for you guys tonight too. But these were color, and these were actually photographs of pieces that I'd already painted. Okay, so here I am. I'm just going to try to sharpen her face, right? So I'm going to go in a circle. I think it's always easier to razor blade on an arch. So in a circle, right? So I'm making basically like an eyeball that's kind of meeting up at her face. You see that? So in a minute, her face is just automatically going to become super sharp, and the rest of her. And this is kind of like, I feel like this is a fun process too, because it's like kind of like playing a trick on your viewer. And what you're doing is you're basically saying, you can't tell, but this wax is like a varied thickness, right? It's thinner in one area and thicker. You know what I'm saying? Like, look at all the wax that's coming off. Like, no one would be able to tell standing in front of this that this area is so much thinner, because it's like this nice gradual curve, right? And it basically goes back to everything we know about photography and shallow depth of field, where things are out of focus, and right. And look how sharp her face is now. I mean, it's beautiful. So I basically like carved. If you run your hand on it, you can kind of go like in like this and out, you know what I mean? Okay. Now, if you get little nicks on there, like little razor blade nicks, you can kind of just go over them. You can also rub them out with your hand, or you can smooth them out with a what? With the heat gun, but I would, yeah, yeah, but very, very carefully. Okay. So that looks good. I think that looks beautiful. Okay, so at this stage, I have these two perfectly smooth, beautiful, waxed photos, and I can start to think about hand coloring them. So let's just take away everything that we know about encaustics and fusing and using other encaustic paints. Do you think that you could just use acrylic on the top coat?
I feel like I would say no, but you would say sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just take like the simplest process. So, and again, like if I don't have any incising in this piece, right? But say I just wanted to add, you know, some marks in it. Like what kind of mark? Like here's a little screwdriver. Like let's say I just wanted to add like little dots in it, right? So I'm just like, this is a nice, totally flat surface. So let's just say I'm adding like little dots. Right. And I can see over here when I added the dot, I can see how thick the wax is too, which is kind of cool because, you know, nobody can really tell. You know, you're the artist, you're the one making this, you're going to control what people know or don't know. So here's craft paint. This is craft paint. So I can take a little bit of craft paint and a paper towel, right? And I'm really just trying to get these edges knocked away. I'm going to put a little bit of craft paint on the paper towel, and I'm just going to like rub it. And I guess like in a way, I've been working with wax for so long, I'm kind of like, this is a surface. Like who cares what I put on the, like really what's going to happen to this? You know what I mean? Like this isn't going to dissolve it. It's not a chemical. It's just like a little bit of paint. But like it looks kind of pretty, right? What did I do? I just put like a translucent black mask on it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, it's not great. It's not terrible. So let's start to tweak it, right? So
would you only do the acrylic like when you knew you weren't going to put more layers of wax over top, or does that not matter?
Yeah, you can't put layers of wax on top of acrylic. This is the top coat only. Top coat only. And I'm not going to put anything on this anyway because I already poured on it and shaved it, right?
Right.
So I'm just using a little bit of a wet paper towel, and I'm just kind of like lifting this acrylic up a little bit. Right? But look how cool my little dots look, right? They look really cool. They look like little bullet holes, right? They look so cool. And I just really wanted to show them, just kind of show the depth of the wax, right? Now, the other thing I could do is I could scrape a little bit, right? Because I know that this paint is just sitting on the very edge, outside edge of this piece. I could take a razor blade and I could look, right? Look at that. Right? So that's giving me like, look how cool that texture is. It's giving me just that little lift, right? And it's just showing me that there's a photo under here and it's giving me a little bit of contrast. So that's really beautiful too. It's just giving me a nice like irregular movement, right? So it's not a sharp line that I was getting with the paper towel, like a cut out. It was making it a little bit more blending by using the razor blade, right? So what do you guys think? Do you like it?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that is like, I think that's in a weird way. This is like, it's almost like, not that it's frightening, but it's so beautifully simple, right? It's like, okay, what's wrong with doing that, And it's a lot more like this process that I started out with, minus all of the toxic alloys and the oil paint and the possible yellowing, but they look very similar to me, right? I mean, granted, this one isn't green, but you know what I'm saying? It's like that idea of kind of like putting the wax on, creating these very minute little like textures, like little teeny razor blade, like just what happens, putting, and then wiping off the paint over where the subject is, and then blending the lines, right? And honestly, like if you learn to do that, I think that this, like if you can do this well, it's like then everything else just seems kind of like you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do that too. It's kind of gives you like the key to the door. All right, so let's do something more complicated with this one. We're not going to use acrylic paint. This is, and mind you, this was just black craft paint.
Could you use like gouache or watercolor? Or
No,
is that too watery? Like it wouldn't.
too watery. It's not too translucent.
Too translucent.
Yeah.
So would you be able to use the not the paint sticks, but like the pigment sticks, or those two?
Yeah, we're gonna do that next.
Okay.
So
You,
go ahead.
you could use oil paint.
You could also use oil paint. Yep, we're gonna do that next. I'm gonna use oil paint for the peonies. So hang on a second.
Leah, I have a question that's kind of a weird one. When you are shooting a model, and do you need to have them like sign any kind of like waiver or anything like that, like knowing that you're going to use their photographs in your artwork?
So let's do something kind of fun too. And let's just take masking tape and let's split the canvas. And I know this is small, but I think it'll be fun, right? So let's split the canvas. On the right side, we're gonna do pan pastels, and on the left side, we're gonna do pigment sticks, okay? So in a way, I think that I have so much like tactile experience with wax that I kind of feel like with these super smooth pieces, I'm like, it's so quiet. I'm like, wait, where'd everybody go? I think that's what happens to me in the winter too. I'm like, where'd everybody go? Where's all the bugs and flowers and, grass? Like, where'd everything go? All right. So let's say we don't add any texture, right? And texture would be brush strokes, incising, stencils, right? Everybody's clear about what texture is? Okay, so let's just go smooth, and we're just going to draw a line right down the middle, okay? And we're going to use pigment sticks on the left. And pan pastels on the right. So let's see the difference. Okay, so for pigment sticks, like I know that these colors up here are light. So I could just take some like light pink, right? So I'm just lightly toning the surface. Now these, for this super smooth surface, I don't think these guys are that exciting. I think they're kind of like boring, but they do the job. They like look slightly, they're definitely tinting the wax. I don't think that they're amazing. Like I don't love them on this bleach beeswax. I don't think it's really what they're good at. To me, what the pigment sticks are good at is like showing off the nooks and crannies of the texture, because they're so like oily. They can go like into all of those spaces that the wax makes. So, I mean, in a weird way, this looks like kind of boring. It just looks like paint on top of a surface. So let's see if we blend it a little bit, if it gets a little bit better, but it might just be like too much. Like where did the photo go, right? I mean, I'm not seeing enough of the photo. I feel like the pigment sticks are kind of boring. But they are slightly toning it, right? They're giving me a little bit of pink at the top, a little bit of blue at the bottom, right? But they're not really doing anything that great, but they are doing their job. All right, so this is what it looks like without the paint. So I guess it looks better with the paint than without the paint. Do you guys agree?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and then I could clean her arm. Like if I wanted her arm to pop out, I would just kind of make a space. All right, so that's pretty much all you can do with the pigment sticks there. They have like a little bit of a funky texture, I think, on the poured wax, but they will dry and they will stay there. They're gonna dry matte and they're gonna look good. All right. Not much else you can do there. It's kind of like done, done, and done. So here are the pan pastels. And these guys are pretty translucent and they're powdery and they're gonna stick to the wax. Now you could add a little extra element here, which is you could use a heat gun, right? What happens when you use a heat gun on a pan pastel?
It intensifies the color?
No.
No, I'm guessing.
I know, but that was a good guess. Thank you for guessing. I appreciate that. That's like classroom enthusiasm. Woohoo!
I know. It's better than crickets.
Yeah.
So because of the weight of the pan pastel, it's like the lightweight, right? It's like the lightweight guy here, right? It wants to go, what happens is basically like it's sitting on a surface, and if you heat that surface up, it's basically gonna like engulf it's like the big fish eating the little fish, right? The wax is just gonna suck up the pan pastel and eat it. So let's see what happens though. So here, I'm just putting it on my finger. This is the pan pastel. It looks pretty. I'm gonna mix it to like make it a little bit like warmer, right? I'm gonna kind of go right up to that edge. And already it looks totally different, right, than the pigment sticks.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna add a little white down here. I can kind of shade it, kind of go around. Now I'm not afraid to go over the edges of the model, right? Because I don't want her to look just like she's cookie cutter, right? I'm gonna try to blend it a little bit. It's a little bit harder to blend the pan pastels, I think, with other pan pastels than the pigment sticks, right? I think pigment sticks blend so nicely. There, I kind of cut her out, and then I have to switch gears right into my blue tones. I can add a little greeny blue. I'm gonna add a little darkness at the bottom. Right, so that looks kind of good. All right, so let's see. So now I have two options. I think it looks mediocre. It definitely actually right now looks much more opaque than the other side. Also, the colors are more intense, right? So what do I do now? I also don't like this like line of her. So I'm gonna have to go blue into her dress, right? So how do I fix it? What do I do now? I could do a couple things. I'm blending with the paper towel. That's not really doing anything. So my other, look, I blended with the paper towel. It didn't do jack. Nothing happened.
What if you heat it?
I could heat it, or I could
scrape it.
Right. So I could heat it. I think if I heat it, I'm like never getting it off, right? That's like a commitment. Like I'm going to heat it. Okay, so I'm never getting that off of there. It's in there.
Oh no.
It's in there. All right, so I don't want to do that to the bottom. So it's in there. Okay, that's okay though. So we just totally committed. It's good. We just learned. And it looks kind of terrible. Like I don't like that red. It looks ridiculous. It was so pretty before. It's like too much. All right, so but let's see down here. So maybe scraping it a little bit. Again, like this is a good test of what the actual, like what the mediums actually do, right? So these are the types of tests that you should be doing yourself. So that you go, oh yeah, this is what pan pastel looks like on wax. Do I really like it? Instead of being like in the middle of a painting, being like, oh, I'm going to try this. This will work, right? So it's
Right.
kind of nice. Like if I just literally put this on my wall, I'd be like, yeah, that's what pan pastel looks like on the right. And that's what pigment sticks look like on the left. I know that I definitely like pigment sticks better. Okay, they're easier for me to manipulate. So let's try, okay, now we have to do another layer, right? So this is there. So now we have to try to do another layer. What happens with doing another layer? I'm getting further and further from what?
The photo.
I'm getting further and further from my photo. Is that really where I want to be?
Right.
This is something I'm asking you guys, but I just literally did some journal writing last week. And do you know what I wrote myself in my journal? I'm like, stop adding so much wax. I literally told myself in my journal, I was like, stop, like stop adding so much wax because I'm a photographer too, right? Like I like my photos, right?
Right.
Like, you know, it has to be that, like, we have to achieve this balance. How do
Yeah.
we achieve balance? Like, how do we achieve balance? It's like, we don't know, except we make a lot of like bad art. Like we go too far so many times, or we struggle. It's like, and then, you know, you want to come back and fix it. You want to do it right. Okay. So the razor blade is working here. Like I'm getting back to my photo. I like it a little bit better. I definitely like less pan pastel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's looking okay. Oh, look, it is coming off here. Even though
Oh,
I
good.
fused it in there, it is coming off. Okay, good.
Oh, good to
Yeah,
know.
it is. Yeah, it did. I mean, it didn't right there, but it did a little bit. I guess I like was scraping hard enough. So I got the commitment part out of the way. And I honestly like it like that. I think it looks okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was a lot of removal. So now I'm going to try to go just a little bit of like weighty. I'm trying to blend it. So I honestly think that the pan pastels are harder to blend. And it seems weird that they're like that, but I just am, maybe I'm just better at pigment sticks. I don't know, but. And then let's put some white in her dress, maybe a little bit. And then I still have to figure out this blue a little bit. That looks okay, right? So very lightly in between like where it was darker. That looks okay. That looks okay. What do you think?
It's better that since you scraped off the bright colors.
Way better. Way
Mhm.
better.
I like what you said about, that you like your photographs. So why cover them up too much?
Yeah. But right, but there's also like right, but you don't want the wax just to be like a gimmick, like it's a balance. Like you want it to be there, you want there to be art in both, right? And you want them to complement each other.
Right. So how do you find that balance? Because I struggle with the same thing.
Trial and error. Like right now, like trial and error, like mixing these methods together. And then timing, like getting the right, getting the right method on the right, getting that. It's kind of like riding horses. It's like, it's a lot of elements that are moving around and it's like getting it right.
Mm.
There's no right answer. Every photo is different and every time you wax is different, But I think the end result when it's done right is really, really, really beautiful.
I feel that same push and pull as you guys are talking about. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, am I too attached to the image? If I'm so attached, then why am I putting wax over it?
Right.
But then,
Okay, so why are we putting wax on it? So for me, I've been asked that question a million times, right? So why am I putting wax on it? I'm putting wax on it because the print, right, is like a skinny corpse to me. Like it's like skin and bones. It's like naked, right? So I want to like embellish and like beautify my print. I love what I photographed, but I want it to have more life and texture, right? I also want it to be not matted and framed, right? So I want it to be original, but look how much those pan pastels just help that piece, right?
Yeah.
So that was just like the right amount of color in that situation. And it just like gave it just the right amount of pop. So it's just a tiny little bit of yellow and red, right? But like little movements like this, I think can be so like tastefully done, where you're like putting a layer of wax on, either brushing or pouring. You're putting some incising in there. You did some razor blading. You know, you put acrylic or something over it. And then you're just doing like these nice little touches, right? That are kind of just making it dance, but it's not being like forceful, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's soft and complimentary. I think what happens sometimes is that for me is like I get like this thing, and I don't know if you guys get it too, where I get like determined in my head to physically like have an experience, but then I'm like, wait, that's not complimentary with what's what's going on with the photo. Like it just doesn't work out. And then you're like, all right, it didn't work out. But part of it did, then you have to just evaluate it. And that's the nice thing about wax is you do have this sort of addition and subtraction where you can go back, right?
Mhm.
So if you find yourself going too far, like I just went too far with those flowers, like they were good, and then look, I just used my razor blade. So to me too, it's really a lot about blending, like blending these layers and blending these techniques. Okay, so here's the two pieces we made, right? I still think that in this one, the blue is too strong, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it
right.
kind of
You're
weights
right.
it down at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's too strong down here, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I have to do to it? I have to use a blending technique, right? So it's either add another layer to it to blend it or what?
Scrape it down.
Yep. So blending. You guys are really like you're learning what to do, right? You're becoming like, and that really worked. The white really worked. Why did the white work?
Toned it down.
Yeah, and it also did what?
Made it.
It made this line what?
Stand out.
Yep. And look, I can pop a little black in there, which makes that, but that was like too much, right? The black is almost too much. It was nice just to have that little line there. So again,
Yeah, when your headphones were off, I asked you a question, so you didn't hear me. But I was wondering
Oh.
about models. When you photograph models, do you have
Yeah.
them sign a waiver or anything like that? How does that work?
Yeah, all my models sign a model release.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you don't want any model coming to a show and being like, oh, I should get royalties on that picture.
Right.
No.
You just, you don't want that.
No.
No, but I pay a lot of my models. I mean, for me, it got to the point where I wanted to work. Like I knew I wanted to work. It wasn't like a social thing where maybe somebody could come over. It was like, I knew I needed to get something done and I wanted people to come over ready to work and work. So I was like, here, sign the paper and we're going to, you're going to do what I tell you for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were so many different phases of my working with models though. I mean, there were times, and that's sort of just your professionalism and your confidence in yourself. It also, some days like you feel like you have a direction or like a project and some days you don't, right? So those days that you feel like you have work and you have a project, they're the ones where you're like, here, sign this and I know what I'm doing. But then other days you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm like project is, like come over anyway and we'll figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are 3 different processes, but I think I'm going to show you guys, if you want me to, I can show you, right? So those are 3 different ways of coloring the surface of the wax, right? And then if you had brushed the wax, what would be the difference between these and brushing the wax? You would have just had, you would have had the obstacle or, layer of texture to deal with, right? And then how the paint, the pigment stick or the pan pastel was reacting to the texture, right?
Right.
So, and what happens in that, I think, is that you get nooks and crannies or spaces or, places that, and here we can just do a little texture just as an example. Just to remind you, that's like another obstacle. It's almost like adding an element of difficulty, right? And I mean, to be totally honest with you, I painted in this way, flat wax, poured wax over photos. I painted them for years before I ever even considered texture. I was like not interested in texture at all. And then I was like, oh, wait, texture. I kind of thought it was like gross. I was like, ew, why? Why would you want that on your beautiful photo? Like, ew. All right, so let me just I'm going to use this burlap. We'll make some, right? I'm just going to make some texture here. This one has a layer of poured wax on it or something. And again, like, right, how you treat the texture, I can leave it rough. I left the strings in there, right? So that's a lot of texture. So what does the texture represent here? What does it represent? It represents a space or a place that she's jumping out of, right? It also represents a major obstacle in front of the picture, right? So it's like I built a fence or put a wall in front of her jumping, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's literally what happened, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then whatever color I make this piece is going to sort of control the hierarchy of what I make the other colors. So let's just do the same thing again, right? Now I have this wax there. I did it with wax medium. Let's divide it in half. Let's divide it in half this way. And again, I'll do the bottom in pan pastel. I'll do the top in pigment stick. So pigment stick, this is the blue part. Here's the pigment stick. Right? It's going to go around the outside real nice. It's not going to go over the texture very nice because it's too high and bumpy. I can force it on there. I could actually rub it directly on there, right? I can use more and I can rub it in, right? And then I can rub it off. So now I have now let's just look at this. I just added color to this texture. So now I just basically have this big glob of texture, right? So what did this is now the what? This is foreground or background?
The texture?
Yeah, the whole blue thing. The whole
it's
blue thing.
It's a foreground.
Right, it's a foreground. And it's kind of working because it looks like actually there's like a whole other, like now it looks like, you know what, this is kind of cool actually. Now it looks like this is a mountain range. You see it?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what? A lake, right? So that's pretty cool that texture just transformed the whole thing into a whole other thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's literally the power of texture and also sort of the power of another like three-dimensional layer in art, right?
Yeah.
Is the brain wants to assimilate it as having, I think the brain wants to assimilate it as having meaning, or I'm always like, it looks like this. I don't know if you guys are like that. Maybe I'm just weird, but I'm always like, what does, like, it has to kind of like have, I think because I'm a photographer, it kind of has to have some logical, like, what the hell is that? Right? Like, why is that there? But I think it's really beautiful in that way. Now, if it's really that way, is any mountain range or anything all one color?
No.
Right.
No.
Right. So now I'm going to be forced into adding another color. And I don't have a picture of this in reality, but I have to kind of look into my mind's eye and go, all right, darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Right? So, okay, so a little bit darker. I just put purple in there. And I mean, you don't have to go too crazy, right? Do you see how like a little bit goes a long way?
Yeah.
It's like a little bit goes a long way. Like that's enough. Like I don't need to overshade it. I could put like a little, and I'm not going to overcomplicate it by adding too many colors. I'm just going to use this, and I could, make something a little bit lighter, just in contrast to making everything, just so that it's not all, like, I could just add, right? And now they look a little bit more realistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now this down here needs to say pretty chill if I really want it to be like a lake. So maybe I don't even add any color to it. Or if I do, it's going to have to be very, very like soft. So I could add like a very, very pale, extra translucent, pigment sticky, like green, right? Light green or neutral white. But by pigment sticky, I mean a lot of extender, right? So nearly translucent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here's the extender. So in a way, I'm trying to figure out what I'm seeing before I do it. Does that make sense? Or it's sort of like do and evaluate, like do something and then evaluate it. Like, what is it saying to you? So I think the thing is too, is that, in a way, you want to get the art to like talk to you. You want to get the wax to talk to you, like, because it's creating something. You're like, what are you creating? Like, where are you taking my photo? What is happening here? Right? At least that's how it works for me. I can't just like paint in shapes. I can't just paint in, I have to kind of paint in terms of stories or picture stories, right? That's how that works for me. If you guys have something else going on for you, that's great. But that's how no, seriously, but that's how I do it. Oh, look, and I had magically green on my finger. That is weird. No, seriously, that was weird. That is exactly the color I wanted, but I really didn't have it. I didn't know, like, no, it's so weird. But that is such a pretty color, right?
Yep.
It's such a pretty color. And look, it's like not a lot of paint. Like, I'm not trying too hard to make this happen is my point. Does that, you know what I mean? I'm not, and look, when I over tried right there, that looks bad. Right? Like, so I've always kind of had that artist conversation with myself is like, wait, when I don't try that hard, it looks really good. And when I try really too hard and I'm too uptight and I'm like working too much on it, then it starts to look like shit. Right? I'm like, God, what is going on? Like, so I'm trying to darken the bottom, but I don't want it to be too much. So again, like add, subtract. Now working small like this, I think is very confidence building. I think it's really good to be able to handle small areas before you go larger with, visually and just, I love the practicality of being able to just use my finger. If this was a larger piece, I absolutely would not be able to just use my finger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, being able to handle wax and work smoothly and visualize things, see things in it, I think is very helpful too, right? To really get it down small before you go big. And I mean, honestly, like this piece is really cute. I had no idea that it was going to be this cute, right? And the reason that it's cute is because we magically made those mountains. I definitely did not have that in my mind at all. Did any of you?
No.
No.
Right. So that's why we use the wax. That's why I paint with wax. That's why, is because sometimes these magical little things happen and you're like, wow, that's so cool. You take your photo to another place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be imaginative. It could not make sense to anybody but you. Somebody might get it. Somebody might, nobody might ever get it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's experiential for you, the artist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Yeah. All right. So, and like if I wanted to add a little bit more to this, I could add a little bit of some orange or pink up there, and like maybe that should be done with the pan pastel. I mean, maybe just a little bit, right? And so the thing about the pan pastel is it's going to be matter and flatter right? And a little bit harder to blend, I think. But that looks okay, that little bit of red there. I'm not gonna do too much more. I think that's a little gem. And for whatever it is, it just like made itself, our little purple mountains. Okay. So okay, so my wax is ready. I'm gonna pour the black and white piece now. Any questions? That was fun.
Yeah, do you ever do pours anymore?
You know what? There's a part of me that really thinks that I should do some. I have a show coming up in May, and this year has been like 2020 was such a wacky year. I didn't really have any other show. Well, actually, I had a show in June that nobody got to go to, which was really depressing. But I made the work and it was installed, and they did do like a thing. But I love the pour process. I think I am gonna do some pours. I actually have also been thinking about doing like more installation type work where I make a lot of pieces in various sizes and really put them close together. So when I think in terms of that, I definitely want the poured as one of the types of work.
Mhm.
And I think that's really beautiful. I still think it's really beautiful. I even just like this idea too of like pretty simple except for like one element, I mean, and this was just perfect. I didn't do that, and this was just perfect the way it went right over her feet. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes the magic just happens. I think I'm gonna do some poured pieces this year, and I definitely. But I have incorporated it for the last like 5 or 6 years. I've always done a piece that has like a poured portion, which I like too, where it's like poured in a part of it and then like busy and chaotic in other parts. So I like that even within the piece. And I can show you, kind of what that means in this piece, because the poured gives me like a quiet space, which I've always really liked. I've always really liked that beautiful, perfect surface. All right, so you can see, Jen, too, how kind of like I hate shavings. Like this is my pet peeve. Is like this has got to go. I hate this. I do not remelt this. This goes right in the trash. I hate it. So this is the shaved bleached. I can't even say it. Shaved bleached beeswax.
Why do you not remelt them just because it picked up little
It's
debris?
dirty. Yeah, it's dirty, and it's like I don't know. It feels weird. I don't know. I just don't like it. It's like weird. Feels weird. It doesn't really stick together very well. I don't know. All right. So this is tight on my fit here, but I think I'm just gonna use it anyway, or I'm gonna use it kind of like I'm gonna use it kind of cockeyed. Oh, maybe I'll just use it. I'll just use it. It fits in there barely. All right, so let's just now hope that I have enough wax to cover this piece, right? Okay, so I'm gonna take my pan. It's not that hot. It's kind of hot.
So
Actually, go ahead.
what temperature is your wax that you're pouring?
It's like pretty much on my pancake griddle at like 200.
Okay.
And this is the bleach beeswax. So, and this is a nice black and white, right? So here we go.
Yeah.
Center. You can see it start to move out. And then what I do is I push it forward. So I go corner, 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 right? So this one's being a little stubborn right here, but there I go. So it kind of likes to connect with its friends and then move forward, right? And it's leaking out a little bit, which is fine. It's leaking out a little bit.
So what would happen if you did a pour with the other wax with the Damar? Would it just be too cloudy, or?
I think it's too cloudy and not translucent enough, and also does not shave nicely.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the thing that I like about the bleach beeswax is that it shaves fine. That's why I don't like the shavings, is because it shaves so fine. that it comes off beautifully and gives me that concave curve that I can create, but I can't do the same shaving with the wax medium. It's too sticky
Okay.
and it doesn't shave the same way. Okay, so here's this one. And it's beautiful. It's a perfect pour. So that means that I don't have any air bubbles or anything. We're getting lucky tonight. I do have what I call a little wrinkle, but it's so slight. I don't. Okay, so I'm gonna want to get my paint scraper and get it up pretty quick, because if it sticks in this pan, it can just be kind of a pain. And now I don't even see my paint scraper. Does anybody see my paint? Oh, maybe I buried it over here. I don't know, it totally vanished. But that's weird. Where did I go, you guys? Where did I go? Nowhere. You didn't see my studio gremlin. Studio gremlin.
Maybe under your cookie sheet. Did it get buried?
No,
No.
no. Under
Did
my
you, did you have it with you when you walked off to get other stuff?
Yeah, right? Probably. I don't see it. All right, so I'm gonna grab, oh, I see one though. Oh, there's my whole toolbox. Hello. All right. Well, thanks for making me look over there. But anyway, so this wax was extra. It poured out of the. All right, so here we are. Beautiful edges, right? I could leave that if I like that. I can scrape this off the bottom. Right? Okay, and I'm gonna go around like, so this is probably too much. So I could just figure out how much I want to scrape it down over here. I could also like paint wax on these edges. You know, like you could add wax here too, right? And you can see like it's you can see how thick it is, right? Can you guys see this like 1/4 inch right here? That's wax.
Yeah.
That's how deep it is. That's pretty deep. I mean, we could leave this here. Now, what I was saying when Jen seen me do this is you could mask it with masking tape and you could make the top thicker by adding an edge here. But I think that's plenty thick enough. I mean, it's thick enough for me, and I'm going to want to shave it down, so I have to wait for it to cool. All
How
right.
thick should it be when you pour?
No, this is good.
Like, so what is that, like a 1/4 inch you said, or?
Yeah, but it
less?
just does it. I mean, if you just cover the piece and let it
Yeah.
roll, it usually just does it perfectly itself.
Okay.
There's only been a couple times when it's been too thick, and that's really just if it's like not hot enough.
Okay.
So if you keep it at 175 or 200, you'll know if it's too cold, it won't connect. Did you remember how it connected?
Yeah.
I think if it's too cool, it won't connect. It'll just stop moving. It'll just land and stop moving, and you don't want that. That means that the wax isn't. You want it to land and pull and move. Okay, so did you see here? I damaged it. Did you see? Do you see here? I boo-booed it. So this would be the perfect time for me to take this wax on the tray, right? And take my paint scraper and just scrape off the top a little bit because it's still warm enough and I can just fill, do you see that? Look how beautiful. It's just like fill the hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then scrape it off. And then I'll just let that cool there, like let it heal. Don't hit it with any heat or anything. Just let it heal. And then I can hit it with a razor blade. Okay, so technically I just have to let this cool. And then I'm just gonna go through the whole process again where I'll scrape it with the razor blade. And I can show you, I mean, I don't really think you need to see me paint with the Galkid just because you're not gonna use the Galkid, but we could paint it with, rub a little oil. You can really, this surface really allows you to do anything you want as far as adding the color. And also, you don't have to add any color. Like, you know, you could leave it very natural, au natural. So while we're waiting for this to cool for a minute, we have like 20 minutes. You guys have questions, things you want to talk about, other things, because this is our last session.
Oh, I have a question. It's kind of two parts.
Go ahead.
How do you store your finished pieces? And then
Great
when you
question.
ship them, how do you ship them so like they don't get too hot or the wax melts or something, depending
So
where you're shipping it to?
So depending on the time of year, and I think I mentioned this to you before, but this kind of like cold, anything under 32 degrees is actually worse for the encaustic art than
Oh,
the heat. Because what happens with the cold is that the wax contracts, and then when it's contracted, it's brittle. So when they throw the box,
yeah.
it's more likely to crack. So actually it's harder to ship in January and February. In the summertime, I ship FedEx or UPS priority. I wrap the piece in paper. I cover the surface with wax paper. I wrap it in one layer of bubble wrap, and then I stuff the box, right? So if you think about all of those sort of wrappings on the box or on the artwork, you're kind of insulating it from the heat in a way, and it's not getting exposed to sun. So I think one of our misconceptions about heat is because heat is impacted by the intensity of sunlight.
Mm.
So if the piece isn't seeing any sunlight, it's not actually going to get, its internal temperature is not going to get that high.
Okay.
So you're really better off shipping, April through November than, January and February. Right?
Okay.
And as far as shipping in the winter, ship as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And same thing, like you're going to insulate it, you're going to wrap it, cover the front with wax paper, wrap it in bubble wrap, wrap that in packing material, floating it in a box. And what will hopefully happen is that it won't have any direct impact to it, even if it does get frozen. And then tell the people that are opening it, to give it a day to acclimate to room temperature before they open it.
So leave it in the box for a day before.
I would recommend that. Yeah. If it's winter time, I would say, yeah. I mean, if it's already cracked, it's, the acclimating isn't going to help it. But if it's, a sudden change of temperature is worse for it. So it's actually the cold, I think, that's much more damaging than the heat.
And then when you're storing it in your studio, how do you store it? Like, do you put wax paper between them if they're like
No, I do.
stacked?
So
Like, how do you?
So
Yeah.
cardboard is fine in between. Poster board is fine. You can wrap each piece and store it, but I just store them face to face and back to back. So they're pretty, and also art should be stored vertically, not horizontally. So if you ever get an opportunity to see an art handler or watch a video about art handling, art should be stored vertically, standing up and face to face, not back to face. And then technically it should be sound to stay there. You should be able to like shift through the artwork or slide it out. I mean, if you get, if you want it to be pristine, perfect, you need to wrap it and then stack it.
Okay.
Very good questions. I also recommend that you always date, sign, title, and date your work, as well as record it with a photo, right? And that's why I like to use the Google Photos, because I feel like I can make albums of, by year. Also, Google keeps all of your photos in chronological order by time, which is helpful.
Yeah.
And good questions. I also like to do like series. So I might tend to have like 1 or 2 shows, or I don't know, 2 to 4 shows a year. And then what I do is I try to title the, the works that are going to be in a show together under the show title. So I often just make up titles. They can even be called like working titles, but they might sort of help me group bodies of work based on what I'm interested at the time. And it's nice to sort of compare like what you were interested in 2 years ago versus what you're, because we're always changing.
What do you use to sign your work, and do you sign it on the back?
I sign it on the back with a Sharpie. I don't sign on the front. You could scratch into the front. If you want to, you could get a stamp made, there's a lot of things you could do. I just sign on the back. For some shows, I would make like a little collage and glue it in the back. Like this one has like a little piece of paper that I signed and I glued it into the back. So sometimes I would put like the show title and put them all on the back and sign the name of the piece and my name and the year. And all my pieces are one of a kind. So there's never going to be, but I have done editions where I've painted the same negative more than one time. So I keep the same title. I just add an abbreviated title. So like if I painted the same photo like 25 times, each one would say like the title, and then it would be like size or color, something that differentiated it from the other ones. It made it original. So
okay, that was my next question too, when you're starting to talk about titles, because I know you do a lot in series. How
Yeah.
you handle that?
So if I'm using the same photograph or file, I'll make a name for it, and then I'll use that same name. It's kind of like horses. So if you buy a horse from a farm, they might have the farm name as the first name, and then each individual's horse name is the second name. So like they brand, like Lister has Lister Pipson, Lister Bluebell, Lister Dragon, Lister, right? So it's that name and then the other name, whatever you want to call it. Those are good questions though.
Those are good answers.
They work for me. I mean, you can make up your own system. It's kind of like you're your own librarian. You could be like, I don't like that system. But I like to, because my work is very generational. And I think we're affected by multiple factors of our work, of our lives. And so, all right. So here I am scraping this. Any other questions? This one looks so beautiful.
That one piece from 2000 had a hanging wire. Do you do that with all of your pieces?
Yes, I always do a hanging wire. Yeah, if they're on wood or they're heavy, I don't want them on some little, I don't want them just on the panel. They can slip off onto the floor. Mm-hmm. I always do a cross wire. I'd always do D-rings and a wire. So I do 2 D-rings, one on each side of the inside of the panel, and a wire across this.
Okay.
So look how pretty this poured wax is. It's so beautiful. Yeah. It's so beautiful. So I can just shave, I could just shave the light parts and let the dark parts stay foggy. But look how beautiful the bleach wax shaves too. And you don't have to shave the whole thing, right? You can be very discerning. It's about revealing. It's kind of like, if you've ever done boudoir photography or anything sort of sensual, it's very sensual. It's like what you're revealing, and I like that aspect of it. It's like, you don't have to show it all if you don't want to, and you have such a beautiful exterior to kind of Any other questions? So you guys know I'm teaching in Vermont, right? I'm trying to get this workshop happening in Vermont. So if you know anybody who wants to go on a retreat,
I'll pass the word around. I just saw that I signed up last week for your, or not signed up, but did your Facebook page, and I saw on there that you're coming in August, I think.
Yeah, August, like a Monday. It's like during the week. It's like Monday to Thursday. It's gonna be. We're gonna hire a model. We're gonna be at a farm, so we'll take pictures and eat farm food. Take pictures of the farm. Go on nature. So Lorraine's work is very organic. It's a lot about nature and patterns in nature,
Mhm.
water reflections, plants, trees.
Nice.
Yeah. And she has a lot of interesting techniques that she uses in her work, like string and 3D stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm signed up for. I'm registered for that.
You are? You're
Yeah.
amazing. Awesome. All
I
right, bring a
know. It
friend.
looks
Bring a
so
friend.
cool.
Bring
I
a
know.
friend.
I shared your.
Oh my
I
God,
shared your post.
I'm so excited you're coming. You're gonna love it.
It
Did you
looks
pick a room?
amazing.
Which room did you pick?
Well, I can't remember if it was like I'm trying to remember now. Thoughtfulness, forgiveness. I can't remember.
I don't know. I love them all. Oh my God, I'm so glad you're
I love
coming.
them all. I just
I'm
whatever.
so glad you're coming. You just totally made my day. You guys, Celia, Carrie, you have to come too. To come from New Mexico to Vermont. It's so.
I've never
like,
been to Vermont. I'm super excited about that.
Carrie's like, no, thank
Oh,
you.
it's a good time of the year to come too. I mean, winter's great if you love winter, but if you don't, summer is beautiful. And Waitsfield's really nice area.
Oh, I can't wait. So
Yeah.
excited.
Have you been to Vermont before, Leah?
My assistant Athena lives in Barry.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I went there and I taught with her, I think 2 years in a row, we taught out of her garage, like so rogue. Like we taught on tables in her garage. I mean, it was so fun. It was just like laundry line across the yard of everybody's artwork, and like it was just really grassroots, very, very fun. Yeah, and what happens, we're gonna have a printer, I guess, at the farm. So you'll be able to print your pictures out while you're there. So I can help edit them, and then we'll be taking them and printing them and painting them. So it should be pretty fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
In the past, I've usually printed for people before I got there. So people send me stuff. Like that's what Jen did when I went to Texas. All right. So do you see how it's pretty? I could dig deeper, right? I could do any type of line work too. And because this picture is like so perfect for this medium, you can kind of see how the wax reacts to the light areas versus the dark areas. And what happens here is I'm definitely going to need to give it some structure, right? So even just like a little bit of a dark pigment stick can kind of just reestablish the darks. So I can start with that and we can just kind of see what that looks like, right? So just to kind of, and now I could have made the jar any color. So that's the thing too about a black and white is it's kind of like having a coloring book and you don't have to use black. I could have made the jar blue, purple, green, any of the darker colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can still add that color too. And this is sort of how the pigment stick looks. So it's kind of dry. It's a little sticky. I could add a little bit of extender stick to it, but for some reason, I feel like this just reminded me of like one of those bright blue mason jars, the blue glass mason jars.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be nice. I can add some blue. And if the pigment sticks are acting too sticky, like then they just need a little bit of the extender. Or you could use also coconut oil if you want to be like organic.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
you
cool.
can from the kitchen. Yeah, you can use coconut oil. And I like to mix these colors. You know how I am, so I have to like put a couple colors in here.
So what is your Facebook page?
Oh, my name, Leah McDonald.
Okay.
Yep, MacDonald. Yeah, and I actually today, I don't know if you guys saw my post today, but I found this morning, it was so random. Like I had a snow day, so yesterday I had to substitute teach. I was exhausted. I had 7th and 8th grade all day and they had art. It was just like the longest day. And then, yeah, I was like wiped out. I didn't even leave work until like 4:30. I leave at 2:30 and I get there at 7. I was
Wow.
exhausted. And then this morning I had a snow day, so I was like, woo! And I was on my phone and I found an app that I can scan my negatives with my iPhone. It is crazy. So I like literally spent like 2 hours this morning not doing what I was supposed to and scanning negatives on my phone.
Did it work good? Because I want to get one.
It was not good, Carrie. I wouldn't say it's good, but it's like everything else. I think with the phone is it's kind of like a temporary fix. It's like a tease. It's like it kind of just makes you happy that you're like doing something you should be doing like on a higher level, like more.
Yeah.
But like they're a little out of like they're not perfectly sharp, and I probably can't blow them up. But at least like they're my negatives. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I was such a better photographer with film, and I did such like I'm really proud of the work I did with my camera. So in a way, it was just kind of like happy to be with them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I felt like I was doing something, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to try to print them, but hence maybe smaller artwork, right? If I can't blow them up too big, I just have to do a lot of like really small, sweet pieces of my favorite photos that I scanned on my phone. I mean, again, like like it's just sometimes you just got to be like true to life, you just got to be like, this is all I can do right now. Like, whatever.
That's
right,
kind
so-
of why I started doing this, is because I had a lot of, from the 1980s when I was
Yeah.
in the dark room, I had a
Yeah.
lot of negatives.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, you might like this app, and then I feel like you can scan your negs and you can send them to your Gmail, or you could send them if you have somebody that prints for you, you could send them to the lab via email. There's probably a lot of possibilities, and you can see how big you can get away with. I'll let you know. You can keep in touch with me. I'll let you know how big I feel like I can print them. But if I'm going to put wax on them too, I mean, am I that worried about it if they're grainy?
Right.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out this jar. And so really what am I doing right here is I'm really learning about what? I'm really just kind of teaching myself how to what? How to
Shade.
paint. Yes. So that's like the one thing I have to say that I love about wax photography and caustic photography is that it really teaches me how to shade and how to paint, right? So it's just super practice. It's so relaxing. If you make a mistake and it looks lopsided or like definitely not like reality, you can go back. I mean, I wish I could paint a jar like this, If you think the color's wrong, you can add another color to it. You could scrape it back with a razor blade. So it's like these kind of like addition and subtraction. They're like integration, right? Like that looks kind of nice because this is actually more authentic to the way glass is than the way I was painting it, right? Because glass has sometimes like these like sharp reflections or whatever. And it's just so relaxing. It's just like a paper towel, a razor blade, some paint. I mean, this is like really my happy place. So again, like this one could just be like a light color, this flower, we could put white in it, right? Or we could add a little color to it. It's got a little blue in there. And there's no right or wrong with this too. Like I don't have to paint this whole surface, right? I could just paint a little bit. I could paint like just a couple of these flowers. And also if you want to get super artsy, look, you go like this, right? You can put the pigment stick right on there. And then blend this way too, right? So you're almost like reverse blending. So you're not blending by addition, you're blending by subtraction. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of go until you like it. And then you can be like, oh, I have texture there. Do I want it to be smooth? And if you want it to be smooth, you're going to add extender, right? That's going to make it smoother, right? Because it kind of has a little tooth on there. Yeah, I try to really spend a lot of time editing my photos and getting them down to like a group I think can work with encaustics. And then I've talked to you guys about this before, as I start out small-ish, like 5x7, 8x10. And then if images are successful for me, then I go bigger. And sometimes I even go through like my little, like, okay, wax on paper, I pour it, I might try brushing on it, right? I mean, and I just think sort of familiarity with a photograph is really what makes it successful or makes your wax successful, is like
When
feeling.
you're editing for encaustic work, do
Uh-huh.
you find that you drive the contrast more, or like how would it change because you know you're putting wax over it when you're editing versus just leaving it as a print?
So I definitely think, I think you guys, I edited this photo for this is actually not my photo. This is like, this was actually a mom and daughter that came to my studio to paint like 2 weeks ago. I edited this for them and I made it black and white. So I use that filter program called Alien Skin.
I
And
love that. I have that.
yeah, I use Alien Skin, and what that gives me is it gives me sort of foreshadowing to, I can basically like preview the photo in a lot of different options before I print it. So I just can like, it's almost like time traveling. Like if Alien Skin was the dark room, it would take me like a month of hard work to get all of the variations of the print that I can get like that in Alien Skin, right? So it's like, again, technology, like good or bad, it's like, it's just makes everything like faster. It's like you're fast forward in this process, but I tend to go for either off white and kind of gritty, like, you know, like they look aged or like they were printed on old paper. And I also like very kind of high key black and white contrast, but it just depends on the photo. Like I never say that every photo has to have the same filter. You know,
Sure.
I just really like the photos, and sometimes I just don't know. And so what I do when I don't know is I give myself room to look and check it out. So I like might print the same photo 2 or 3 times. One, you know, with like a sepia, one with a tri-X plus, you know, stop, one stop plus, you know, and then one just like, I don't know, you know, more simple, you know, like, so I'll give myself sort of like a range. Like also like, look how pretty, like I'm just like lightly painting this peony, you know, it's just like pretty. It's like no big deal. It's like very gentle. And then like what I found out too is that sometimes when you add something over here, it sort of like changes the blue. So now I'm like, oh, the blue's too bright, right? So like, and because this surface is soft and movable, you can kind of like tweak it as you go. And if you don't like it after it dries, you could probably moisten the surface with a little bit of that medium or oil, or you could always just lightly scrape it off with a razor blade and repaint it, you know? But I tend to like, if I'm like it and I let it dry, I'm usually pretty happy with it. I mean, and I could paint it another session too. All right. Wow, it's 8:02, ladies. I hate to leave you, but I'm gonna go eat some dinner. And I love this class, and I'm here for you. So, you know, reach out to me, come to my workshop in August. I don't know. I'm gonna teach a figurative workshop here too, in Philly in July. And I don't know what else I'm going to teach in the spring, but I'll teach again in the fall. I feel like spring is going to be busy, and I'm getting my vaccine. Woohoo!
Woo, yay.
I know.
Woo!
I know. Did anybody else get a vaccine?
I
Not
got my
yet.
first shot. I got